We are fashionably late to this story in Ukraine, so I won't fill you in on every development, but the basic picture right now is this. Russia's war of aggression is not going exactly as planned. They've moved back a bit and shifted their strategy towards the Donbass. And in this retreat, people have discovered gruesome remains. So how do we make sense of this war? On a darts level, the question really is, how does Russia, and more particularly, how do Russian intellectuals make their case? Is there actually a philosophy of the Russian invasion of Ukraine? For that, we turn to the Russian far-right thinker Aleksandr Dugin. Recently on Al Jazeera Arabic, he said, "This is a war of ideas." I quote, "It's a war against global liberal elites who are trying to take over the world. We are fighting against the liberal world order in order to provide other nations and cultures with the right to self-determination." This far-right neo-fascist thinker is widely described as Putin's brain. Now, I quibble with that because it's not exactly right. When you review the historical record, it's clear that Dugin was pushed out of Putin's orbit, at least officially. In the past, Dugin has actually been critical of Putin for not being hardline enough. But the war seems to have changed things. Since the war, Dugin has really become Putin's chief evangelist, and he is still one of Russia's most influential state philosophers.
We are not the part of the global civilization. We are civilization by ourselves. Huntington was absolutely right. Fukuyama was absolutely wrong. And we had no other possibility to prove that Huntington was right without attacking Ukraine. It's sad to say, but it's probably us who start this conflictual situation in order to be heard.
Dugin is a Rasputin-like character in Russian politics. He started in a kind of countercultural neo-Nazi vanguard, but he ended up in the upper echelons of Russia's military and foreign policy establishment. When he was there, he wrote a hugely influential book in 1997. It's called The Foundations of Geopolitics, the Geopolitical Future of Russia. This ultra-nationalist tome is still used as a textbook for the Russian imperial vision. In the book, Dugin articulates this clash of civilizations vision. It's a vision of the West versus a new Eurasian bloc supported by Russia.
So that was one civilization basing on the materialist approach and strategically on the dominance overseas, on the colonial attitudes, against the other kind of civilization where totally different values were put in the center of the life. The dignity, military power, tradition, conservatism, national interests, families, religion, Christianity. So modernity against the tradition. And applying this methodology to Russia, I came to the conclusion that that explains everything that is now and will come. So from that moment, I deduced from this application that there will be the big war between continents, the great war of continents. So confrontation between sea power and land power represented by Russia, by heartland, sea power represented by modern globalist, postmodern liberal West.
To understand more about Dugin and his ideas and just how dangerous they are, we turn to Matt McManus. Matt is a political theorist and my go-to for understanding today's far-right thinkers. He's also a member of PillPod. That's a podcast on critical theory. They recently did an episode on Dugin, and I wanted to follow up on that episode and talk more with Matt.
Aleksandr Dugin is like what happens if you take Jordan Peterson, get him really messed up on vodka, and then just push him a few more degrees towards Nazism. It's stir it all together.
It's funny, sometimes he has almost a chameleon-like appearance. If you Google around, watch some videos, read some things, you may or may not actually see that. You kind of have to dig deep sometimes. Sometimes he has this sort of air of respectability, or at least tries to put that on. Could you tell me a little bit more about kind of his presentation? How does he sort of present himself to the world?
Well, there's no doubt that he definitely is a mercurial figure, right? And there's some who suspect that might be deliberate on his part. Others think it might just be pathological. But it definitely reflects itself in his kind of intellectual genealogy. So just by way of background, Dugin really kind of came of age in the era of Soviet collapse. It had a profound impact on his thinking. And he went through a wide variety of different transitions in response to the end of the Cold War. Everything from embracing the far right to flirting with the far left to mysticism, spiritualism, and eventually settled on a kind of far right Russian nationalism that was probably really starting to take developed form in his late 1990s work on geopolitics, which has been very influential for most of the right in Russia and, for that matter, abroad. Since then, he's kind of become known as Putin's brain. It's impossible to tell whether or not that's true. Definitely, Putin says some Dugin-esque things or Dugin-esque things at points that make people suspect that there is a relationship there. But there's no doubt that he's a cheerleader for Putinism, and he's had a big impact as well on the American and European far right, although a bit more.